Hello, everybody, and welcome to Friends of the Force, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Brad.
And I'm your host, Sarah.
And this week on the show, we are talking about Star Wars, the High Republic, the Battle of Jedha, written by George Mann. And, oh boy, we're back on Jedha. How exciting. And it's another High Republic book discussion here.
On Jedha, baby.
The Holy City.
I love it when we get to go back to Jedha because it is so clear across, every story that we've gotten with Jedha that has such a rich and complex history with the Force and just with different peoples being there. So I'm always happy to go back. And this was no obsession at the end of the day.
I think that we should take our own pilgrimage to Jedha and just record a bunch of podcast episodes in the Kyber mirrors beneath the Dome of Deliverance. I don't know what you think of that idea, but
considering the Star Wars happened in a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and we do know that the Holy City was genocided and blown up by the Empire, there might not be much there anymore to record
You make an excellent point. That did happen, unfortunately. Yeah. Well, scratch that idea.
Right.
But an idea that we're not scratching is talking about this book. So let's continue. We're gonna talk about this book today. Full spoilers ahead.
You know what? We've been doing this for a long time, but there's nothing that I love more than you just figuring out a way to transition. It's really, you're really good at it, and I'm always so impressed. And I'm so sorry to the listener when I'm like, wow, that was a good transition every time. Because it's not a novel thing, but I just really enjoy it, Brad. I really do.
We are bringing the quality here at Friends of the Force. So if you like our episodes, make sure you're following us on all of our socials and leaving a review. We got to blow this podcast up just like Jedha. So let's get started, folks. Before we get into,
you said we wanted to continue podcasting, not end podcasting.
Before we get into today's book discussion, a couple of bits of news right up front that we wanted to discuss, one of which is High Republic related. So, Sarah, do you want to kick us off with the, I guess first off, the non-High Republic related bit of news that we got in the last couple weeks?
Okay. Guys, gals, folks in general, Star Wars Visions, season/volume 2, releasing on May 4th on Disney Plus. So many different animation studios, different styles of animation. May the 4th, Visions. Okay, guys.
Let's go.
We love Visions in this house. We really do. Visions is good quality food. Very delicious. Yum, yum. Okay. And we were so excited when, there was a Visions panel at Celebration that we had to leave in the middle of because we had a conflicting photo op with Kelly Marie Tran. It was great. It was really good. But I still regret having to leave. And we got to hear that there was going to be a season 2, which was so thrilling and made my little animation enjoying heart happy. So yeah. Oh my gosh. I'll stop talking now. You go. You start talking now.
Yeah, total agreement with everything you just mentioned. Star Wars Visions was, I think, one of the freshest takes on the Star Wars galaxy that we've ever had. So getting even more of that this year, which we heard, spring of 2023. We weren't really sure when, but May the 4th feels just right to get more Visions. And now I have something to do that day. So Star Wars fans have definitely been getting fed the last couple years. Just off the top of the list here for short titles, which we did put all of those out on our Twitter, and you can also find those on StarWars.com. I think they have a list of all the titles and all of the studios that are involved. One of which is actually the first Black-owned studio, anime studio in Japan, which is awesome. So right off the bat, I Am Your Mother jumps out to me from Aardman. Aardman is also a pretty well-known company that did the Wallace and Gromit. So that's going to be really interesting to have that studio doing Star Wars and what that animation style might look like. But specifically the title, we talk a lot about mothers to Star Wars and the absence of mothers. So right away that one jumped out to me. I like want to know everything about this story. Is it a Leia and a Ben Solo story? I know it's not, but like, my conspiracy head is like, oh my God, we're going to get a Leia story in anime. So who knows, but that one jumped out to me. I also really am interested by the Spy Dancer, which is from Studio La Cachette, which I believe is the French studio. And that's really exciting too, to get some, just like more countries in the mix and get more of a varied perspective on the Star Wars galaxy from around the entire globe. And, if Visions continues past season 2, I'd be curious how that's expanded even more, or, what the approach is moving forward. Because James Watt at Celebration did say that like Star Wars and anime have a very bright future. So I'm sure
Yeah.
this will not be like the last of Star Wars anime for quite some time.
Yes. I also have to say, like, honestly, looking at all of the um like directors and their bios, my gosh, there's a lot of really good short filmmaking in here. Paul Young, he produced the animated feature My Father's Dragon, Wolfwalkers, Song of the Sea, The Secret of Kells, and The Breadwinner. Multiple of those films were nominated for Oscars. Oh, and of course, we're getting one that's co-directed by Justin Ridge.
Yeah, Star Wars
Yeah,
Resistance alum. I mean, Justin Ridge has also like done
so
Rebels,
many
Clone
things.
Wars, The Last Airbender. Like, that's great. And they're working with the studio in Japan, which is going to be exciting. So it's like
Right.
I
And
guess co-done by Lucasfilm and them.
yeah, and oh my gosh, Journey to the Dark Head. That has a really fascinating title, In the Stars. The one is just called Sith.
Okay,
Like
I lied. The I Am Your Mother is not the Ben Solo story. The one that's the Ben Solo story is The Pit.
the the pit. Yeah. I just
Yeah.
think there's a lot that's going to be cool to explore here, and I think we're also going to get a lot of different styles, because would bet that the Aardman one is going to be in stop motion. I could be wrong, but
Yeah.
that's what
Oh,
they're
that would be
most
so
known
cool.
for. So, um I I'm really excited. I'm really excited
Yeah.
about this. And I think that, Visions just expanded what Star Wars could be in so many ways that were so refreshing. So I'm looking forward to having more voices and more styles in the mix, and continuing those sorts of stories.
Yeah, totally. I cannot wait. And May 4th is going to be even better, because not only are we getting Star Wars Visions, we are also getting Star Wars Young Jedi Adventures on Disney Plus and Disney Junior. So like,
Yay!
the show that is geared towards probably like under 10-year-olds, we will be there. We will be
No, literally
watching.
like ages like 4 to 7.
Yes, no, we will be watching completely. Because this
Somebody
is
said, and I had a really good laugh about this on Twitter. Somebody said, and I apologize that I can't remember who tweeted this. It was a member of the High Republic community, and they were like, people who will be sat for Young Jedi Adventures, and it's like toddlers and queers in their 20s. And I was like, that's so real. It's like, oh no, it's me. Because
oh
oh
my
man, High
gosh.
Republic community, I love you so much. But also Young Jedi Adventures set in the higher Nubs, guys.
Nubs. Can we
Nubs?
talk about Nubs? Voiced by
Nubs.
D. Bradley Baker, which is one, amazing, but like two, Nubs is the cutest thing. No offense to Grogu, but like you have some competition now. Um, People are obsessed with Nubs already. Like I think Nubs has become the new Star Wars mascot, like the staple of the franchise.
I already
Everybody's
love
obsessed with
Nubs.
Nubs. I saw somebody
I
tweet, and I apologize as well. I don't remember who it was, but they just said teeth, and it was like Nubs up close on the mouth, and then like Gunji, because Gunji also has the
right,
snaggletooth.
yes.
So like we love our snaggletooth Jedi in Star Wars.
There was one more tweet that I have to mention. And again, I apologize. We just are really not good at our sourcing our tweets today. We're just so excited. We just forgot to save anything. And this tweet just reads, Nubs capitalism when? Which, like,
Oh my
yes, let me
gosh.
get in on the Nubs capitalism, please.
I know
Also,
you
if
don't
they
collect
ever want to
Funko
do,
Pops, but the Nubs Funko Pop, that might be a little enticing for you, I feel like. A little bit. Or like the Nubs Black
somebody else can,
series. Give it to
no,
me.
somebody else can get me the Nubs Funko Pop. I
Nubs
accept gifts.
plushie. Let's go.
Nubs
Right
plushie.
now. I'd buy a Nubs plushie.
I want like a Niku plushie while we're at it, while we're putting in requests.
Yeah. Yeah, why not?
Um,
Just pretend
I
he's
want
in
it.
Young Jedi Adventures and say like, yeah, this guy's in there. They're
No,
like, no, he's
I'm
not.
just
Like, yeah,
talking about
yeah, he is.
cute little guys in the Star Wars that I just love and I want
Yeah,
to do a
yeah.
capitalism for.
So for those of you who aren't aware though, just in case, so Young Jedi Adventures is like the first animated series set within the High Republic. Really first anything in the High Republic that's going to be on TV. So it follows Jedi younglings as they study the ways of the Force and learn to become a Jedi. And that also includes Master Yoda helping these younglings out. There's Kai, Liss, Nubs, their friends Nash, and RG-83 on the planet Tennu. So, really, really exciting. The idea that, 5 to 7 year olds potentially, I don't know if like younger than that. I think that's the
Like,
right
yeah,
age.
like literally even younger than that. Like
Yeah.
I'm
Like,
like we're talking Dora the Explorer age, I think,
yeah,
for this
yeah.
show.
They're going to be getting exposure not only to Star Wars, but to the High Republic. And like, I'm thinking of all the books that I read as a kid, like to think if I had the High Republic when I was in middle school and I got to just like devour those books, I would be so thrilled. So it's exciting to think that these kids are going to get that gateway into this universe and then like have a whole slew of books to choose from and read and identify with. So like I think overall this is a excellent idea for a show, and I think it spells a long future for the High Republic beyond even when the books are done. Like I think it's going to have some longevity for fans. So this is
Yeah,
just a start.
and this is one that also like does have a slate of publishing announced with it, and it's like level 1 readers and little golden books. So I am so excited for littles to watch the show and then to like have a story that they can also read in the book right away. That's, geared towards them and um, not with characters that are from other places, like uh, you think of something like, I think it's Spark of the Resistance by Justina Ireland, and, a great story, but, like, that's one where those characters are much older than the age range that that book is for, and I like that, and, like, there's a lot of value of that, and I think that's great. You can connect those stories to the movies, but I also like with these ones that, the characters are littles as well, and that, like, the content that is, the primary place where these characters live is exactly for the age range that the books are for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
I
So
don't know.
very
I don't know if that was
exciting.
there's a lot of value in both things there, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally get it. But I cannot wait for May 4th, honestly.
It's
I
gonna
will
be a
have a
good one.
lot to watch while I'm sitting in the Shop Disney queue trying to get the new Star Wars Starbucks mugs. So,
Oh, every
that's the good
time.
news for me. Yeah,
What are they
every
gonna do
time,
this year?
every
What do you
year.
think?
They better do Mustafar is all I'm saying.
Oh,
I
yeah,
want
yes.
Mustafar,
Kashyyyk?
Coruscant. I mean, like Kashyyyk would be
I would buy the heck out of
fantastic.
that.
Yeah.
Um, just so you know, May the 4th is on a Thursday this year. So,
Okay. Okay. Cool. Cool.
just
Cool.
everybody so that they can all prepare yourselves for when you need to wake up and,
Yeah. Yeah.
when you need to call out of work, that sort of deal.
Yeah. No, you got to get on those mugs. They're excellent. I always love them. I have too many of them, and they need to stop releasing them. But also, please don't because I can't stop. Anyways, that is the only news that we had on the show today. Very exciting future for the High Republic, for Star Wars Visions and anime. Cannot wait. But Sarah, before we get into our episode on Battle of Jedha, why don't you give us our bookstore of the week as always?
Bookstore of the week. Every time we do a book related episode, I like to share with you an independent bookstore that is cool and doing awesome things and maybe in your community. And I need to do a better job of covering more places. But today, I'm sharing with you a bookstore from the great state of Indiana, my neighbor, the Midwest. So I am sharing with you Brain Lair Books. They are in South Bend, Indiana, and they are open Wednesday through Sunday if you are in the area. They are a Black owned, women owned children's bookstore located in South Bend, Indiana, in the near Northwest Neighborhood Center. They love to partner with local schools and universities. They also specialize in juvenile and young adult literature written by and for the BIPOC, LGBTQIA plus communities, as well as disabled communities, as well as adult nonfiction about ending white supremacy, promoting anti racism, and becoming a social activist. They seem awesome and super, super involved in their community, which I love. I think that's a great. I think independent bookstores are great ways to build connections with community and to keep literacy alive and well. In any area. Um, I did look up some Star Wars books. You can find them at Brain Lair Books. They will ship them to you. You can find some in the store. And we were just talking about the Young Jedi Adventures. You'll probably be able to find those books um, when those books come out in Brain Lair Books as well. I know that today's book is not a children's book, but I love supporting children's literature anytime I can because there are quality books meant for young readers. And that doesn't mean that adult readers can't enjoy and get something out of these books as well. So, highly recommend visiting online or in person Brain Lair Books at brainlairbooks.com. They have an online store and also a physical store. Amazing. We love when that happens. So, that is our bookstore of the week.
Yay! Awesome. Well, shout out to that bookstore. Definitely go support them if you can. And any bookstores, indie bookstores around the world that you are local to, because they need your business. They love books, and they're not a giant corporation. So if you're able to give them money, do so, because bookstores are the lifeblood, like Sarah said, of our communities and of knowledge and all the good things in life. Books, they're great.
We love books.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I also, of course, very fond of bookstores, as we know.
Books are great, and that's why we're talking about the Battle of Jedha today. So,
Oh, that
without
transition.
further, just I try. With that being said, full spoilers ahead. If you haven't read Battle of Jedha, definitely turn back now. Go experience it for yourself. But we will be diving into this. We'll talk about some of the notable moments in the book, our overall thoughts on the plot, and all the other things that you can think of. So let's get into it. So Sarah,
Yes.
Battle of Jedha, we've been long awaiting this book ever since it was announced at Star Wars Celebration Anaheim. You and I were like, oh my God, Jedha, the temporary cover art was great because it just showed Jedha. And we're like, oh my God. And then we got
Yeah.
eventually the cover with Creighton's son and Ada 4. Ada 4 is a Nikto Jedi. So we were very excited because we're huge Niku Vozo stands. And we were like,
It's
great, we get
true.
a Nikto Jedi finally. This is like what we've always dreamed of. Ada 4 is great, can confirm, great character. But what did you think of the Battle of Jedha? Like, what are your overall thoughts on the book? Both good, both not so good. Like, how are you feeling coming out of this? And as we head into the end of phase 2 here shortly in the next couple months.
It feels like we just started phase 2 and now we're like past the halfway point. I'm like, oh
Yeah,
no.
it's crazy. Wild.
Yeah. I will say that this, guys, I hate to say it. I really do. This was not my favorite. And there were elements of this that I really loved. I of course was so excited to return to Jeddah. I'm fascinated by the politics, the different religious things that are happening on Jeddah. Like I love the setting and I love what's happening there. For me, this wasn't quite the story I was expecting, I think, from the name and title, The Battle of Jeddah. I thought to myself, oh, maybe it's because I put expectations on it. Like, oh, this is going to be like the linchpin of the whole thing. This has got to be a really important turning point. Um, and it was a turning point in some ways, but it also put us just back to square one with area. Gosh, they say them differently in the audiobooks than I say them in my head. I say them Iriam and Arono, and they say Iram and Arono. Or just
That would be
just
correct.
the fam
Arrow, no.
listeners, just roll with my wrong pronunciations, okay?
Yeah, we're trying.
I
We're
can't
trying our
I
best here.
can't do Iram, it hurts, it hurts. Anyway, um, but yeah, so this one was not my favorite. I didn't feel like it was paced as well as I wanted it to be. And I didn't love the for some books the countdown clock works really well because you're going, oh shit, like it's gonna go down. But for me, I didn't quite feel that sense of urgency in the way that I would have loved to. And I felt like it was a little bit stop and go throughout this one. That being said, I enjoyed the production of this audio drama. I thought it sounded good overall, and it kept me engaged in that way. So I appreciated that.
I'm in total agreement with you. The production quality on these audio dramas have always been like top tier. I love getting the full cast, which is exciting because you just get an array of voices and performances, and it really makes it feel like you are immersed in the Star Wars galaxy, which I love, and the soundtrack and the sound effects. It's so great. For me as well, I really did come out of this a bit lukewarm, and I know what you might be thinking, listener, like, oh God, they both are a little bit lukewarm on the book. Don't worry, there are still many things that we did really enjoy and want to pick apart. So like this isn't just going to be a more negative review. Like we will really balance those two things. So stick with us. But for me, I also kind of came out of it just middle of the road. I think the countdown clock didn't necessarily work for me in the way I wanted, because I feel like for a book titled The Battle of Jedha, we spent a lot of time building up to the battle, and then the battle
There
kind of
wasn't a
came and
lot of
went.
battle, it felt.
Yeah. It was a lot of like every chapter would be like, okay, like 72 hours before the battle. And I'm like, oh, that's a really long time. That's like 3 days, like what? Okay. It's like, oh, you got an hour left in the book, and it's like 10 hours before the battle. And I'm like, wait, what? There's like not that much book left. So that was a little different. I think the pacing didn't work out as well. And like you said, it could be a thing of expectation. Like I think when we read the Fallen Star, despite our criticisms of that book, like it was really filled with a great sense of urgency and like impending doom throughout it, which kept me wanting to turn the page. And I did a couple
Right.
times struggle with wanting to pick this back up because of sort of the slow burn that happened in certain parts, where there'd be like a big momentous shift in the energy, and then all of a sudden it was like stalled for a while. Um, and especially because there were like kind of two different explosions that happen in the book, and you open with one explosion that isn't necessarily the first explosion that happens, and you're like, oh wait, when are we getting there? And I did like how it hooked me right off the bat, but yeah, I think it was just a little bit too slow for me. But I do love the characters, I do love the setting, and being back on Jeddah is like so natural for the High Republic, and I think it was really exciting to explore that setting. And it's also a setting that's being explored in Cavan's comics, and we're getting a lot of Jeddah in phase 2, and I appreciate that as always. I think one other thing for me as well was I just struggled with the lack of a singular kind of anchor point of view. We had like Lorna
Mm.
D, who was the titular character. We have Afra, we have Dooku. They were all like the central character of the audio dramas, and I feel like there wasn't really that anchor for me in this book, which kind of made me feel a little lost among the varying points of view. And I also struggle with audio dramas in general, like with voices and stuff. And that's a me issue, but I would have liked to have had more of a like, this is this person's book, like I know Creighton and Ada are on the cover, but it's, then it was like, okay, Salandra is sort of the main character, and now it's Creighton, so it
And
kind of jumped a
Kev.
lot for me. Yeah,
Yeah.
so just a little bit disparate in that area as well for me, but I do love all the characters. They're awesome. Like I really do cherish them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's interesting because when we got the first couple of audio dramas that were like first person narrated by a single character telling us a story, I felt a little bit like, oh, I wish we could get something more. Um, And then we got that with Tempest Runner, and I think it's also a little bit unfair to be able to have to compare this to Tempest Runner, which is our other High Republic audio drama, because oh my god, I love that book. I love that book. Lorna D, step on me. Anyway, um,
It rhymes.
I know it does. It's just beautiful. We
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so like I really love that one, and I think it did like a larger cast, multi POV well, but at the same time it is anchored in Lorna's story. And I think maybe part of the problem that you're hitting on with this one is that yes, there are characters that are not new to us as readers who have read the other phase 2 stories. Um, but that being said, this audio drama also introduced us to a lot of new characters or characters that we really hadn't spent much time with. So not only do we not have an anchor, but we don't know anybody super, super well.
Mhm.
Like we already knew Lorna D and her MO, we already know Ventress, we already know Afra and I mean Dooku as well in that story. But like um the thing that we're probably anchoring to the most in this story is the setting. And so while I feel really confident in where we were, I felt less confident in who we were with.
Yeah, correct. I agree with that. It's difficult for me to latch onto a character when I'm not able to read their thoughts on a page and get into their mind. And
Mm.
Maybe that will change when I go back through the manuscript for a second reread. I know like the manuscript is really just the dialogue, so you're not getting much more added content, but you don't really get to get inside the minds of the characters as much when it's like this sort of audio play versus a narrative, like where you get to have those chapter point of views and you know what the character's thinking and feeling and all those sorts of things. That is something I struggle with, and I hope maybe like in future books we do get a little bit more of their perspective, because I think Creighton's son's like a really interesting character, and Solandra Show, I gotta say, she's a really awesome Jedi, and I really enjoyed her presence in the middle grade book, and I hope we get more of her
Yeah.
in the future, and I hope she doesn't get leveled because I was very worried about her at several points in this book, and I
Oh my
think
god, yeah. Oh my god,
that was
yeah.
very, very intentional to feel that, like as a reader, because they're like, we know you like Salandra, so here are some close to the leveler moments that you might, want to be worried about. And I hate that they did that, but I also love it because that's my favorite thing. And they did that with Elzar in Fallen Star too, so I love that.
I'm looking at my notes because I was just like taking stream of consciousness notes as I was listening to this. And there were more times, more than one time where I was like, oh no, are they dead? And then my next note would be like, nope, she's just injured, you know? And so I literally wrote, Salandra is going after it, dash, she's dead. And then like 3 bullet points later, it says, Salandra's not dead yet, but soon. And like she doesn't die, like I was so convinced. But also I just want to just jump back for a second. You mentioned, the script for the audio drama, and I have to shout out to our friends over at Del Rey Star Wars / now Random House Worlds, as it says on this book and all books going forward. But this audio drama script is coming out, as of the time that we're releasing this. I think comes out February 14th. And the drama just came out last month in January. So I love that for this drama, you're going to be able to visit it super soon, as opposed to waiting 8-10 months a year for the script to come out. So I love that, because it allows us to dive a little bit deeper. It allows people who, the audio format doesn't totally click with them to dive back in a written word. And it allows people who might have, for any reason at all, the inability to listen to the audio drama to pick up the written book, and in a timely manner. So I just want to shout out the publisher for that one, because I think that's the right way to go for these.
Absolutely. The waiting for the manuscript always made me so anxious. I'm like,
It hurt.
I want to hold it. I want to hold
I was
it.
like, I need to know the
and this
spellings
is
of their names.
yes, and this is a beautiful book as well. Like we just got ours in the mail a couple days ago, and it's like a yellow hardcover. When you take off the dust jacket, the text on the side is yellow. It's got the new Random House Worlds logo on the side, which really like sticks out, and it looks amazing. So the quality of the book is great, I think. I think it's still like an essential book for the High Republic series, and I think like you're gonna want it on your shelf if you can, because it looks nice on there for your collection. And it's definitely a story that does, while it does step back in the sense that the peace negotiations fall apart, it does move the story forward, and we are going to go into Phase 2, Wave 2 with some new challenges and some new revelations and probably some impending doom. With some of the titles that we're getting, like Cataclysm and Path of Vengeance, so we're on the cusp. So while we might have had the expectation that this was going to be the like explosive book that it was, which it was, it definitely had ramifications, and Jedha does get destroyed in some sense, right? Like the statue falls over, which we've been waiting to hear about ever since we saw Rogue One. Like,
oh, that was so funny. I was like, I know that statue.
yeah, they're like, the protector has fallen. We're like, oh my god, it's that.
Pointing at the screen, Leonardo DiCaprio.
Right. So we got that. We got some of those like just massive moments that we've been waiting for, which was definitely gratifying. And I do feel for Jedha and the wake of destruction that the Jedi feel they leave wherever they might be going in times like this. So, and I think it's just the start of that, right? Like 150 years later in Phase 1, it seems to be like a lot going on with the Nile and the Jedi, and wherever the Jedi go, destruction follows. So this is just like the beginning of like a new reputation for them in a way, and that will extend into the Clone
Yeah.
Wars when they're fighting a civil war between Separatist and Republic. It's like, and we'll get into that a little bit, but
But the Jedi aren't bad. They just kind of get themselves into. I mean, we could have a whole conversation about the morality of the Jedi another time actually. Maybe the Jedi are bad, but they just increasingly get themselves into situations that maybe they shouldn't be in. And I mean, that's the whole conversation about the Jedi and the Republic, which, is one that definitely is touched on here, that continues to get touched on in phase one, of course. And then by the time we're in the prequel trilogy, it's like, good job, guys. You've really done it. So anyway.
I want to ask you, did you expect the Path of the Open Hand to have a larger role in this book? Because there is another element to this where there's like a Russian doll of like who is causing the mayhem, right? Because
Right, right,
we
right.
learn that like the Path hired Tilson Graff, and then Tilson Graff enlisted the help of the Brothers of the Ninth Door. And then the Brothers of the Ninth Door are like shapeshifters, so they can make themselves look like, Aram's soldiers who like planted a bomb somewhere or whatnot. And it creates a lot of hijinks and a lot of finger pointing, and is really the culprit of like, there's a lot of biases already in place, and the brothers are able to capitalize on that and create a
Mm,
greater sense of paranoia within the peace negotiations, which leads to, Ambassador Sirox like really distrusting everybody, and Ambassador Tintak also dies in this, so it's like a whole like a slew of bad things happening. But I thought the Path was going to play a larger role because we knew they were going to Jeddah. And again, this maybe is an expectation problem, but did you like what? How did you feel about the Path's involvement in this and the way that the leveler was even utilized in certain parts?
yeah, I think that I was a little bit surprised about that as well, and also where I found myself a little bit confused, because we know the path of the open hand, and in we know what they're capable of. Salute you, characters in Path of Deceit. Um, we kind of know what they're capable of, and they continue to get scarier and scarier, kind of as we get to see them more, right? And I guess, yes, that I did expect a little bit more. And I think the Russian doll here with both the Brothers in the Ninth Door and Tilson Graff uh, made it a little bit more difficult to understand what the path was doing. I did think it was really interesting from the path's point of view when the mother is like really openly antagonistic of Salandra, and like very accusatory towards her, and kind of course where Marta Rowe is back in it with like the Jedi are doing this and that's why we're having problems, and telling that to the littles and that like becoming a bigger thing. But like I kind of liked their point of view. Like I felt their point of view was clear as the path, but I thought the way we got to the action was uh perhaps needlessly complicated.
Yeah, I did think their point of view was also pretty clear, and yeah, I just thought they were going to play more of a part. And I mean, the leveler was on the loose, so it did start to level. I know there is at one
The
point you
leveler
can
did
hear the
start to do some
noises
leveling.
leveling. Uh, there's actually, I love. There's this one quote from Marta, I believe it is, or even the mother. Yeah, the mother says this, and Marta is reprimanding not Nati, who's one of the littles, I believe, that she's looking after, and she talks about how Kevin was misguided, even though he was a good person, and the idea that if the Jedi save a life, someone else has to die to restore the balance. And Marta ends up giving Salandra Show a flower as an invitation to join the path and learn the error of her ways. And it's like, well, if she doesn't understand or she doesn't want to join us, then the Force will find a way to balance her crimes too, quote,
Mm.
to level itself, end quote.
Ugh.
And I was like, oh, that's so interesting how like the idea of leveling the Force, like we haven't really heard that kind of, I mean, we've heard the terminology, the leveler and all that, but to hear the word balance and leveling in the same sentence, I thought was very interesting.
It's so
So yeah,
yucky.
yeah, it really is.
It's like uh, anyway,
But it makes me also worried for Salandra in the future, right? Like the idea that
right.
Salandra could be leveled if the path of the open hand is to be believed. But
Eh,
I did like how
mm,
they were present in this book. I do wish they were performing a little more mayhem so openly, and maybe they don't want to show all their cards too soon. I'm honestly surprised they didn't get caught doing more bad stuff. Because
Right.
like they are so like extreme, and they have such a strong point of view, especially within the context of the convocation of the Force, which is like the whole the council with all the different viewpoints and philosophies and religions, and um, but they are on the watch list at the end of this. You know, like Salandra and Creighton are going to go
Right.
after them and try to figure out what they're doing, because Salandra sensed the leveler. She sensed some sort of muddledness within the Force when she was around the Mother and around the Path, which is obviously the leveler. She just doesn't know it yet.
Right, which is like, "Oh, no, girl. I know what's going on here. Don't get too close." That was me, like, that
Yeah.
whole time. I was like, "Don't do it." But yeah, I feel
Curiosity
like
killed the cat. Don't do it.
right, right. Painful laughter. But yeah, I think that it's interesting that this was kind of just the "oh shit" moment for the Jedi, but just in a minor sort of way, if that makes sense.
Right.
They're kinda like, "Oh, wait, I have a suspicion. Hmm." And I think I expected a little bit more like, "Oh, they're bad, bad, actually." But, you know.
And maybe that's kind of the point, right? The Jedi realize it far too late, and that is the one of the downfalls of the Jedi in general throughout the galactic history is they just realize things way too late, way too far in advance, or not
Right.
far in advance enough. So, and I wonder too, like the end of Path of Deceit, we do get some investigating going on Dalna, and they find some husked figures. So like I think if you put two and two together, they're gonna realize something bad's going on. So I would expect that in Path of Vengeance, which prominently features the uh, Dalna and Marta Row and Planet X. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on. So, and we'll get to some of those future works at the end of this episode. But
I will say, like, and I know I'm perhaps jumping ahead here in the conversation, but like one thing this book was really successful at was like, I was like, okay, bring on Cataclysm right now. Right now. I need to know. Because this did set us back at square one, in terms of the peace versus war for Irium and Arono. I was like, "Oh shit, we've really gotten ourselves in a pickle, haven't we?" And so I really am energized to figure out where they go from here, and it doesn't seem good. That's for sure for these
no,
characters.
not at all. I think the piece falling apart was a very predictable thing, just because of how long the war
I
has been
didn't
going on
predict
for.
it.
Well, we
Maybe I'm
kind of
just like too much of
knew,
an optimist in this sense. I'm like, "Oh yeah, they're gonna find
maybe.
peace. Love cures all. Everything is fine." But you know what? I should have known better considering the second book is called fucking Cataclysm, okay? Cataclysm. But I was like, things are gonna be great. Yay.
It was a bit of whiplash coming out of like Convergence, being like, "Wow, incredible book, 10 out of 10. Love unites all," and then being like, "JK, it doesn't." And I think there will still be some sense of infighting. You know, like the ambassadors are going back to their. I mean, I guess Ambassador Syrax is going back to her world, and they're going to have to deal. Ziri and Fonsu are going to have to deal with the fallout of what happened on Jeddah, and it's like, okay, well, how do we instill trust in the people again? Because like maybe the marriage is not enough, because
Mm,
the people of these planets have been asked to fight this war for so long, and they've lost so much, and it's like, how do you just turn around and trust the what has been your enemy, just because some monarchs are getting married and they tell you to, right? So that's
right.
sort of like the struggle here of the everyday people, is like, can you really work past those biases, and can you, it's like, I think at one point Creighton says like there's two types of people on these worlds, and it's like people who, oh yeah, it's those who no longer understand how to stop fighting and those who hunger for peace, right? And I think the people
Mm.
who no longer understand how to stop fighting are like probably a very overwhelming majority in some ways. And I think the urge to fight is much easier to give into than the urge to find peace. And that's like such a thing with Star Wars, right? Is like, how do you throw down your weapon and like stand up for who you love and what you believe in, right? It's like what Luke Skywalker does. He doesn't give in. He doesn't fight the Emperor. He throws away his weapon and just says like, "I love my dad," and that's what that's what saves the rebellion, right? It's that simple. So I don't know. It's a tough battle for Aram and Arano.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because, of course, that's something like these emotions reflect directly into the real world, and I think that we all deal with this on a daily basis, whether you know feel that fear and that anger and that heartbreak and um all those feelings, or whether you're gonna shift focus a little bit and frame things differently. And I think for the Jedi, especially in the High Republic era, when they haven't had to deal with some of these conflicts in the ways that our prequel and and there on after Jedi have, they feel largely that they've have a command over their emotions. We have the way seeker, right? Way seeker, not wayfinder in this case. Oh my god, my brain.
Correct.
Right. Okay. I will never just be confident about that. Way seeker system in place so that like when they don't feel like their emotions and their point of view aligns with the Jedi, that they're able to go on a different path and refine that for themselves. Like so, there are things in place where people are able to work it out a bit more than our prequel Jedi. But what's so interesting about the entirety of the High Republic and this story as well is that it's grappling with the idea of fear as this unstoppable force, right? Like the way that these Phase One books ended, like every time, and even into Phase Two, it's like, and for the first time ever, he felt fear for the first time ever, this other character feels this overwhelming sense of dread and fear and things are bad. And that feeling, as we saw through all of Phase 1, really really alarms the Jedi. Like it really messes with their head because they're so unused to like actually having that emotion and not being able to process it. And so I think that's what's interesting kind of about these stories in Phase 2 as well, is they're kind of there's a greater sense of curiosity and wanting to search for that hope and search for that resolution. And like that was the whole kind of genesis of both of our kind of key Phase 2 Wave 1 stories, which the YA and adult novel. So like in the YA novel, um the Jedi are really interested kind of in what the path is doing, and Kevmo like really had a sense of openness towards learning more about the path of the open hand. It was that reaching that handout of connection, even if they disagreed on their point of view. And by the end of the book, he's not doing so well. He's dead. He's dead. Um, and in this story and in uh Convergence, all of the titles are just all the names, all the titles in my brain are just not happening today. I'm so sorry. I'm like they're all C's. They're all, everybody, I don't know. Anyway, in Convergence, we have Ziri and Fontu who are making a really big, bold, courageous choice to choose that peaceful option, to choose that hope for peace. And we see that brought into this story with the fact that they're going to sign this peace treaty. So there's a desire to like extend that open-minded hand and like path of the open hand. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to actually do that in that way, but to extend that olive branch and to seek an understanding. And every single time they do it, any of these characters, they just get beat down, in one way or another. It never goes the way that they expect it to. And so no wonder, like by the time that we know the Jedi very well in the prequel times, that like that is not even something they're dealing with anymore in the same way, that same kind of openness. They're kind of rigid in their beliefs and not really listening to themselves.
Hmm.
Anyway, I just went on a very long step stool soapbox moment.
Trying to obtain peace is hard. Like it's not a very easy thing to do. And I just think in a galaxy where people want to inherently fight and they're bred to fight in some ways, or they're raised to be fighters, especially like on planets like Arano, when you get characters like Ziri, who is like a general in an army, and her dad was a fighter, and they're very like hard fought warriors who can't show emotions. Like it's tough. It's tough to like change course to what you've been raised to believe. And I think Creighton makes a point to be like, why is every attempt at peace so hard? And like, why is it always end in ruin? And Ada says it's just the cost of peace, like that it's hard fought and it hurts because it's worthwhile and worth fighting for, right? So it's tough because there's always going to be a fight to have peace. It's just a matter of like which side does that fight give into? Is it like more fighting or is it the actual peace? And
Right.
unfortunately, in this book, it's just more fighting and more war. And I don't envy the position that Ziri and Fontu are going to be in, and neither with the Republic too, because the Republic kind of gets meddled in all of this as well. With Creighton making his big speech at the end to have everybody put down their weapons, even though that means they're going to get court-martialed, right? So,
Mm.
despite the Jedi's attempts to be mediators in all of this and to kind of just be there in case shit hits the fan, which it does, like they also kind of got way too involved with all of this. And I wonder if that's going to have some blowback as well. Um, but I do want to make note too of like one of Creighton's conversations with, I believe it's with Ada, and they're talking about how they had to create these ambassadors for these two planets because
Yeah.
there weren't ever any ambassadors on Aram and Arano, because the political classes folded into the military because of how long the war was going on for. So they're like, there wasn't a need for a political class, and lifelong politicians were becoming generals. And Creighton makes a point to say that would never happen to the Republic. They stand for peace and unity, not division. I just find that fascinating that
Peyton on the clown makeup.
yeah, Creighton, you never say that, man. You never say that would never happen to the Republic because it does. Obvious foreshadowing of the Clone Wars, like, the Jedi folding into becoming generals and commanders from peacekeepers, and they have to fight a war, and creates more division, and it creates planets wanting to leave the Republic because of this. In some ways, the Clone Wars is the forever war of the prequel trilogy, right? It's a war that
Right.
just never ends, and people are distrusting on all sides, and it leads to the creation of the Empire because there are so many cracks in the infrastructure from this war, right? So I found that very interesting, very obvious foreshadowing, and it just sort of shows that like history repeats itself, right?
Mhm.
Especially in the Star War galaxy.
Yeah. I mean, just in general too. But yeah, I thought that was a really fascinating kind of point of view, like, or understanding of Iriam and Orono as places who are dealing with this. Because what I think it magnifies like the kind of audacity of Ziri and Fontu to try and seek peace through this marriage, but it also just really illuminates the gaps in um the rebuilding process. Like, it is really difficult to do, and you're also trying to create in completely new infrastructures and ways of going about things with a public that may not be so willing to um adapt to the change that they're kind of being subjected to immediately. So yeah, of course, Creighton's quote is hilarious in context, and also like laughing and crying at the same time, sort of a situation. But it also illuminates how fragile the situation between Iriam and Orono is for, not only Ziri and Fontu, but the everyday citizens, and for these ambassadors who are now having to navigate a new role that they may or may not actually really feel confident about or want to do.
Syrax was a really interesting character because when Tintak dies, I feel like all logic goes out the window,
Right.
and it's just emotion because Syrax is like, she says, quote, you think the people of Irem cares about what those trumped up royals have to say about any of this? We followed them to hell, right? Like we fought this war. People died fighting this war. And now you're telling us to stop fighting and all those who are lost are going to be forgotten? Like, no chance. No chance we're going to just do that. Like, we're going to continue fighting, or else everybody who we lost have no, like, their sacrifice means nothing or like has no purpose. And it's unfortunate that it's a little bit of a flawed thinking because it's like, I mean, yes, those lives were lost, but like, what is the cost of losing even more lives, right? Like, how long do you continue
Mm.
fighting to say like they can't die for nothing, right? And then like more people just keep dying versus like, when is the time to just like actually extend your hand and offer peace, right? And Syrax doesn't really see that. And it's just interesting to call Ziri and Fontu trumped up royals, right? Like, is that a large sentiment that's held by the public? Like,
Mhm.
oh, we're just supposed to follow these two like people who come from a really well-off family and didn't even show up to the peace negotiations. Like, they are still on their planet, like living lavish lives, and we're out here actually negotiating peace and like trying to sign these contracts, and they don't even show up. Like, what does that show the public? What is the perception of that? And I think for Syrox, it's very negative. It's a negative one, and she's just like, good luck trying to convince any of us that this is worth it, especially after what just happened on Jeddah.
Yeah, yeah, I think it kind of really puts a nail in the coffin for probably the public here, which is probably why the next book is called Cataclysm. It is, again, it's not so good. It's not so good. I would love to kind of talk about another group at play here that adds a bit of complication. Can we jump to the Santekas and the Graphs?
Oh yes, please.
Because we're getting everybody here. So we've got the Jedi, we've got, various force religions and things. We got Jeddah, the location, we got the Path of the Open Hand, we've got Irium and Arono and their representatives, and we also have the Santekas and the Graphs. Okay, there's a lot happening politically here. And I think that actually is really interesting that both um Convergence and this book have been quite political and like dealing with a lot of politics. We know we love the Star Wars politics at play.
We
Um
do. Yes.
this it was I was surprised to get as much politics as we did in this book actually. But the Santekas and the Graphs, we know that they have a complicated history and that they also don't have the best reputations all the time. And I find it interesting that they have a Santeka join them as like their mediator, right, for this peace treaty. Doesn't go well.
Not so well. Add
Morton
another
Santeka,
another Santeca to the death tally.
right?
This family cannot catch a break. Not even Lore Santeca in the sequel trilogy. Every Santeca we know dies.
Don't hurt me like that. I love Lord Santeka. Okay, we just
I feel like the Santeca family is like a meme at this point. You know, it's like and Santeca
like a red shirt.
exists. Yeah, like they just, it's like Kenny from South Park. Like Kenny dies every single episode of South Park. And now it's like anytime you see a Santeca, expect them to immediately die at some point. Because Sunshine Dobbs kills a Santeca in what is it? Path of Deceit. Like, yeah, we've had 2 dead Santecas. Oh,
too many. It's too many.
Too many.
Anyway, Morton Santeka's dead in the explosion, and that leaves them with a hole. And who's gonna fill that hole? Oh, my name is Tilson Graff, and I just am here because I like to be near history, historical events. It's really interesting to me. I'm just here. It's chill. It's cool. I have no ulterior motives at all. I'm just a really nice, upstanding guy who is actually a little bit estranged from my family due to some stuff, and nothing bad is gonna happen.
Oh my gosh.
And I was
never
like,
trust a Graff.
no, Graphs?
Listen, I'm Team Santeca all the way.
Me too. I mean, Lord
100%.
Santeka, he introduced me personally to the Kazrat device. Okay, this is we're on good terms. Me and the Santekas, the Santekas who lived on Naboo, we're on good terms. Okay, the Graphs are the worst. Fuckboys extraordinaire, just asshats extraordinaire, just like bad, not very nice people. Generally, and. Man, and it seems like maybe this race for the hyperspace lanes is a little bit not as fair as it should be, because I don't think the Graphs are playing by the rules in general.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
But I just remember starting this story and Tilson Graff and his talking on the transport that ends up almost crashing and then not
kind of flirting with Salandra.
Yeah. And he was like, I just like to witness historical events. That's why I'm here. And I immediately clocked that, but didn't think more about it. I just hung on to that. And then I was like, this motherfucker.
Oh man. What a scumbag. The Graphs, I mean, Xylan Graff we know too is just bad news from Justina's book Out of the Shadows when we meet him.
What a guy.
The Graphs continue to be just crazy. And they're competing families who each want to prospect new hyperspace lanes and profit off of that. And so there's a race to do that. And I wonder if those two families are gonna, in some sense, be in a race to get to Planet X or find that. We heard Planet X is this like planet at the edge of wild space or at the edge of space that is full of richness and treasures, and everybody wants to get there. So I think they will come back into play, and we know the path, or I guess not Marie Maria Santeca is the one who holds the path and the knowledge of the
Mhm.
paths for the Rowe family. So I was like, is she going to get involved at the end of this phase? Are we going to get some answers there as to when Marie Santeca was kidnapped by Rowe's family? Is Marta the one to kidnap Marie Santeca and start the even greater conflict between the Graffs and the Santecas? Because I believe the Santecas point fingers at the Graffs for what happened, I believe. So I'd be curious to see if that's something that we're gonna actually witness, especially now that we are back in time. I feel like that has to come into play. I do want to pitch an idea to you, Sarah. Do you think
Yeah.
Jude Law is playing a young Laura Santeca in Skeleton Crew? Because I am becoming more
You
convinced
said
every
those
day.
words to me before. You've said those words to me before, and I immediately purged them from my mind. And you might be listening and go, "Why, Sarah?" Because if Laura Santeca is getting involved, I want good dialogue for him, okay?
Valid,
Okay?
valid point.
And I just feel like there's been some good dialogue in live action and some less good dialogue in live action, you know?
Valid
And
point. Valid point.
and I just want him to have really good dialogue. So I accept the potential that I think it'd be cool if he came back. Although I would really like Jude Law to stop playing younger versions of characters because
Oh, that's right, because he played young Dumbledore. I forgot about
and
that.
that's a whole other can of worms
Yeah.
that I will not open today. Uh, you know, but
Although if
that
he's
that
playing a young Laura Santeca, there's the opportunity for the Kazerath device, is all I'm saying.
don't you you can't make me feel this way when the dialogue is not going to be what the Kazerath device deserves. Okay.
We don't know yet. We don't know yet. But I actually have a huge hunch that that is his character.
It'd be interesting.
Yeah. Especially if this
And
is
also,
Mando
like,
timeline. It's a
see,
bit of
this is
time
why
before Force
this is why
Awakens,
I'm
you
not
know?
as excited about it as I could be here. But also, we love the legends of Luke Skywalker. I do like the idea as like the one adult shuttling around a group of kids who are telling stories. Like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know.
It could be really
That's
interesting.
the
So we'll
setup
see.
for legends. So,
I'm here
anyway,
for it. I'm here for it. Jude Law is
anyway.
awesome. I'm glad we have him in Star Wars, but yeah, that's pretty much all we had to say about the Santecas and the Graffs. But poor Santeca family.
Mari Santeca being kidnapped as a young girl and then used for her entire life to make paths for the Nile is bad news. Also, yeah, I won't derail to that in this conversation. I'll derail to it in another conversation. Just the path of the open hand into the Nile storyline. But like, when does what is his name, Asgaro?
Yeah,
When does he come into the picture here? Because we know that the ship is called the Gaze Electric. We know that
right.
Mari is a bit over 100 years old by the time that we meet her
Yep.
in phase 1. So like are probably like just a couple decades out from this.
Yeah, potentially. I think Marta is going to be the one that gets a hold of Maria Santeca. I think it's going to be happening very soon. I could be wrong, but I feel like she will be involved somehow.
It'd be
So
interesting. It'd be
yeah,
interesting. Let's talk about the setting. And we've talked about um Jeddah quite a bit, but I just want to talk about like the meaning of the setting, the Kyber mirrors, the Dome of Deliverance. Can we talk about that for just a minute here before we hop into some of the characters in the story?
yeah, absolutely.
Uh, is it the Room of Requirement? Again, I hate that I have brought up Harry Potter fucking twice on this episode, but like, did you get major like Room of Requirement, Mirror of Erised vibes
Yes,
from
a
this?
hundred
Because I
percent.
totally did.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought of because the mirror P3 says what one sees as a mirror is not a true reflection of the self. It is merely a mirage, an impression of the person you really are. You must look beyond the mirror to find what you truly seek. And likewise, Solandra Sho looks in the mirror, the Kyber mirrors, and sees her old Padawan Pelif,
Mhm.
who's the Padawan that she lost, right? So P3 is making this point as he's spending much of the book saying all these random religious, spiritual, philosophical takes because he was an old ceremonial droid on Jedha. Um, but it was really interesting because, like, yeah, you look in the mirror and you see what you desire, but is it really what you desire on the surface? Like, things are kind of more nuanced than they might appear. I think of like when you look in the car mirror, things are
Yeah,
closer than
right,
they might
right.
appear, right? And so, is her lost Padawan what Solandra really craves for, or is it connection? Is it love? Is it kinship that she really is desiring? And maybe she is missing that because she's not quite over her old Padawan. And maybe Keth is the person that she really attaches to in the story. Like Keth is somebody who she sort of finds a kinship with and a friendship with, and his death really hits her in a profound way, and she tries to tell his story past his own death, and share like who he was and what he accomplished and what he stood for. And maybe that's what she's realizing in this book is like, I have to get past that sense of loss and see like what I can do with the people around me and who I can share in with new memories and new experiences and that's what I can do is what I can control today versus like what I can't control is what happened before. I can't keep blaming myself.
Yeah, I think her going to the Kyber mirrors, allows her to kind of realize that for herself and that she is able to move forward after Keth's death. And I don't know. I worry about her a little bit because I don't know. She's kind of just had a bad bag handed to her with almost being leveled and her Padawan dying and then Keth dying, and like how do you kind of move on from that and uplift rather than bring everybody down with you and the pain of that. Anyway, so I actually think that's like a great transition to talk about the character of Keth, Sarapath, and to talk about his role in the story because I think he's kind of a linchpin of the story. He's a really key character. He connects us to different parts of the story with the Enlightenment Club, with the Jedi, and with like the conflict that's happening. And he also becomes, in many ways, like the hero of this story. So, we were talking earlier about not knowing who the central figure is. It might be Keth in this case. But yeah, what did you think about Keth and his introduction and loss in the story and kind of how it all played out?
Keth is interesting. I think he is definitely an optimist. He looks on the bright side of life and I think he wants to make a difference, and I also think that he doesn't feel like he's making enough of a difference because of his situation and like the job that he has, and he feels like he could be doing more. So he sort of like represents it's almost like if Luke just stayed on Tatooine, like continuing the moisture farm, like that is Keth, I think, in some ways, right?
Mm,
Like always looking to the horizon and never where you are, and like maybe the impact that you are having, even if you feel like you're not reaching your full potential, right? Because like there's always something that as a person you can be doing each and every day to leave an impact and to make a positive influence, like just like random acts of kindness or just an attitude or how you make people feel. I think that honestly, like I think people are remembered not for the things they achieve, but for how they made people feel. Like I am a firm believer in that because you can do all the nicest things on the surface, but like if you're a terrible person at your heart and you people have bad experiences with you, like that is the legacy that you leave, right? And so there's this idea of like what is Keth's larger purpose, and he makes a sacrifice to rescue Solandra from getting killed by a brother of the Ninth Door, and he dies for it, but he thinks that his sacrifice is what he'll be remembered for, but really it's much more than that, which is sort of what the prefix is talking to Solandra about. Did you want to talk about this quote, and we can kind of talk about the idea of legacy and how it relates to Keth, and also like how it might relate to larger than Keth characters like Luke and so on.
yeah, I yeah. I think we should jump into that. And I think that what's interesting about this character is that we do get introduced to him and we lose him in the same story. And so I do think that like the value in his character comes from the larger conversation because I don't know if I felt like I really truly connected with him or saw his role in the story as early on as maybe I should have by the fact how he was focused. Like I liked him, but once we got to kind of him speechifying at the end before his death and then the force music is playing over it, I'm like, "Oh, this feels a little heavy-handed to me." But then we were talking off air just before we started recording about him and you talking about like the value and the connections to other stories and I went, "Oh, he started to make a lot more sense to me as a character and also just like his value as a Star Wars character." So, without further ado, this quote: "Do not mourn for what might never be, Master Show. Celebrate what has already been. What he never understood was that he made a difference every day. He touched the lives of all of us here in the church. Yes, he swept the floors and changed the water and lit the candles, but in their own way, those small acts have a huge impact on the lives of the people here. We, all of us, leave more of an impression on our small corner of the galaxy than we know. That his own story has now come to an end means only that he is complete, that the tale is written and he has now chosen to how wished to be remembered. How he wished to be remembered? Yes. Isn't that all of us any of oh, pardon me. Isn't all nope. Isn't that all of us any of no! No!
We're
Why can't I
keeping
get the
those
sentence?
in. This is great. This is
Isn't
great.
that's okay,
Great
you can.
content. Doing it for the
Isn't that
content.
all any of us can hope for? I got it. I got it. It took me
We
8
got it.
tries, but, like, wow. So I want you to kinda kick off this conversation about, like, the larger perspective here, please.
Yeah, Keth is like such an ordinary character, right? And I think
Right.
in many ways he felt that he was ordinary and not extraordinary, right? And it's all about perspective. It's about your perception defining your reality, as Qui-Gon says. So like if you might not see the value in like all the small things that you do every single day, but like they do, like again, like they do have a larger impact. Like just being nice to people is so much more valuable than like presenting to be nice on the surface through good deeds because you want to appear nice, right? It's like
Mm, mm.
it's all about intent. And I think Keth is somebody who tried his best and did everything he could to like leave a good impression. He was very like committed to his droid. Like P3 is somebody that he really admired and
Took care
um
of.
took care of, yeah, and he had such a close attachment to, and people seem to have such a good impression of Keth. So it's the idea that like you can leave an impact, and it's sometimes an impact that you might not realize. And I think of Galadriel when she says like even the smallest person can change the course of the future, right? Like who would have
Mm.
thought a hobbit from the Shire would trek across the entirety of Middle Earth and like save everything by dropping a ring into the fires of Mordor? Like who would have thought that? Like nobody, right? Um, and so I think for Keth, I kind of honed in on that he swept the floors, but those acts have a huge impact on the lives of the people here. I think of Broom Boy from Last Jedi, right? Like Broom Boy is
Mm.
such a unextraordinary character, but he represents so much more because we know that he is force sensitive, but he is just sweeping the floors and minding his business. And who knows what's in store for Broom Boy, right? Like, does he get out of his situation and have a larger impact, or does he just continue to make a really positive impact on Canto Bight? And, like even if he never gets off that planet, if he can make a positive impact on his peers and do some good deeds every day, like maybe that's purpose enough for him, and like he still holds hope that there is something larger for him out there, but he continues to do the good things anyways because it's what's right and what he believes in.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was a great comparison to Broom Boy because I mean, ugh, that makes me feel already so much warmer about Kath as a character because, Broom Boy is the love of my life, sweetest baby child, but will protect, with my entire being, jump in front of a bullet for Broom Boy. But you're right, like these and the prefix is right too. Like these minor things really impacted others and it wasn't about anything other than just doing the thing because it was the thing to be done and because the right thing to be done. Um, and so I really like that. And you also mentioned like Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi literally projecting the image of himself that he wanted to be remembered by. So like the value of choosing one's own story and one's own path I think is really valuable because that that intent, matters.
Totally. Choosing like the last point here, like choosing how you wish to be remembered, isn't that any of us could hope for? There is a lot of value in that, right? Because like if you aren't given the ability to choose how you're remembered, or if you just choose not to care, right? You kind of like recede into obscurity. And I think in some ways, like we make the comparison to Luke from The Last Jedi. Luke was a character who was totally obscure in the galaxy, and people had forgotten him. He was just a myth, a legend, as Rey thought. Right? She didn't actually think he was a real person. So
Mm,
his legacy, the tale of Luke Skywalker, was fading from existence. It was weak, and literally he projects a version of himself that he wishes to be remembered by, not the version that he is. Like the version of himself currently is one that failed Ben, or has watched his whole temple burn down, and he is like the sum of all of his failures at this point, right? But like if he's like, if I can just project one final version of myself that is how I would have wanted to be remembered, had I not made all those mistakes, right? Had I not just been the legend of Luke Skywalker, right? But had I been somebody who was just simply inspiring hope by doing a good thing and not striking down my nephew and not fighting my nephew in a way, like he doesn't ever, like, right? He just dodges all of Kylo's. Uh, he does the thing that he does to Vader, right? He throws away his weapon. He doesn't fight, and he doesn't fight Kylo, and that is his legacy, right? He never fought. He just stood down the First Order and said, like, no, rebellion lives, hope survives. Like that's all I have to do. I just have to inspire enough hope. I don't actually have to use my laser sword and kill my nephew and like take down 10 AT-ATs. Like that's not a legacy, right? Again, we talk about big bombastic deeds versus just being a nice person, right? And what does Luke do? He
mhm.
shows up and he apologizes to Kylo Ren. He's just a nice person at the end of his life. He finds peace and purpose in that. He doesn't need to be a fighter. He needs to be a source of hope. And I think in some ways, like that's Keth, right? Like Keth shows
Yeah, right,
up.
exactly, exactly.
He's not a good fighter. He just shows up and like makes a speech and helps save Salandra Show, and that's all he could have hoped for in his whole life. Um, but it is a shame that he never maybe realized the value in all the small things that he did throughout his daily life. And luckily,
Mm.
Salandra is the one who can tell that story and maybe help others realize that the things you do in everyday life do matter and have purpose. And even if you might not see the purpose in that, right? Like doing this podcast, right? We do this podcast for fun and it is a hobby, but maybe there's somebody out there who really enjoys that podcast and like it brings a light to their day. Like I have those podcasts where I get a new episode and I'm like, oh my gosh. So just small things that you can do and like, provide a positive impact. That's all you can hope for. That's kind of what we do here. That's what we try to do for all
We
of you who listen,
we try. I mean, I'm just always glad to have these conversations with you and like get to be your friend, and it's a I experience a lot of gratitude in the fact that people listen or enjoy or care. So, um, anyway, bring it back to Keth. I think that like thinking about him in the larger context of the story, because he is a rather small character within the grand scheme of things, uh, is really valuable for understanding like the ethos of Star Wars and understanding so many of these key themes. But also I do think for Salandra it allows her to look forward with an uplifting mindset, and how can she uplift others, including Rupert and like fellow Jedi and just other people. And I like that a lot. So thank you for recontextualizing the character of Keth for me, because I felt a little mid about him for a while, and now I feel much better about him.
Yeah, and thankfully for Salandra, I think that you hit the nail on the head there. She has a much more uplifted outlook. Um, in a way, she's like Luke too, right? She kind of gets out of her, wallowing in sorrow for her lost Padawan, and it's like, no, like, what can you do today to make a difference?
Exactly.
Like, what can you do? Like, Keth stayed the path and kept doing good things despite the shitty situation he was in. So, like, you have no excuse. Like, you're a Jedi, right? Like, you are the leader of the galaxy, like the role model for all things that are good and positive. It's like, what can you do, right? Um, and that's sort of what's next for all these characters, right? Like, we know at the end of the story that Creighton and Salandra are getting the permission from the council to go chase down the path of the open hands
Mm-hmm.
on Dalna and to investigate them, which, oh God, oh no, oh God,
Doesn't
oh
feel good.
God,
Doesn't feel
no,
good.
feels bad, man. Um, and I think bad things are in store for Irem and Arano because according to the Cataclysm synopsis, it says here that violence reignites on the beleaguered worlds. So Fontu and Ziri are going to have their hands full. Um, and it's just going to be a bad time at the end of this phase. But I do want to make note of one line that Creighton
Yeah.
says at the end of the
Give it
story,
to
which
us.
is, the unresolved past always has a way of coming back to haunt you. And this is in response to, joking about Jedha, and he just wishes like they could leave Jedha behind or that they could just forget about it completely. And I think that line is totally the impetus of phase 2, right? Because the Jedi in phase 1 never resolved the past, right? And we know the whole egg hashtag egg
Oh
talk,
my God.
past and present must split and combine, right? So the unresolved past is that like in phase 1 of the High Republic, the question is like, what do the Jedi fear? And the Jedi have not resolved that fear. They forgot what they fear. So when that fear comes back, and for the first time ever, Stellan Geos feels fear, it's because the Jedi don't feel fear. They forget it. They forget what happened in phase 2. They don't resolve that past, and it comes back to haunt them in ways they never would have expected, right?
Right.
And this is the line where I think, I'm going to speculate here a little bit. At the end of Midnight Horizon, remember Yoda comes back with all of the heroes and he brings back a figure with him, a hooded figure that we don't know who it is. I think it's Creighton's son.
Oh my
I think
God.
I think it's Creighton's
What?
son.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I think it's Creighton's son
Oh.
because I think that we have to think about that character that Yoda brings back. We don't know who it is. Has to be somebody from phase 2 who's going to know what happened and who's going to know how to resolve that past. And so I think this line right here for me basically cements that is Creighton's son, and he's going to come back to phase 3 and help the Jedi. He might be one of the people who leaves the Jedi Order. Who knows? So I think he is. Again, I could be wrong. That's my hot take. That's my speculation here.
I have
Sarah has picked up her microphone.
Picked up the microphone. I'm a little shook by the idea of this prediction. Wow.
What do you make of that though? The unresolved past coming back to haunt you. Like I think that is a very layered quote.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Especially in the context of Star Wars and Jedi.
The unresolved past comes back to haunt you. I mean, yeah, we know that within the context of the right here and right now that Cataclysm is a book with a title called Cataclysm, and that we're going back to Aram and Arono, and things are back to square one, as in their shit, and everybody has to deal with that. So that's unresolved at this point. The Jedi dealing with their emotions, that's something that's always unresolved. There's a lot of ways that you can take this, and I'm really thinking now about phase 2 or phase 1 and then Comac running away, and also now the idea of Creighton's son or anybody from phase 2 coming back in phase 1, and the implications of somebody who has that knowledge but thus far has not used it. I think is also Yoda he's alive right now.
Right. And Yaddle's going to be in Cataclysm, by the way.
Okay. Queen Yaddle, and King Yoda of the unnamed species they're a part of, they're alive during this time. So why have they not worked harder to solve the problem? Anyway, not my business, not my conflict, but Creighton's son showing up.
Could be interesting.
I'm like really thinking about it now. Like I'm standing up and I'm pacing. Like
yeah.
This is not good podcast recording technique. I feel like one of those YouTubers that holds their own microphone right now. Instead of like but like I'm thinking about it. I'm so sorry. Like I'm just derailed in like the shock. Anyway, you say something else, please.
I just think I can't wait to figure out who that is. And I feel like maybe not enough people are talking about that figure that shows up. I think that again is going to be whoever that is going to be the key to all of this. We need somebody, like you said, with that knowledge and that mysterious hooded figure that's with Yoda. I just pulled up our show notes from Midnight Horizon. They say they'll do what they can, they'll do what they must, but when they do find you, all you'll be is dust. Like they are uttering the Shrika Rekarai, like
Oh my god.
they know something, right? Like they
They know
know
something,
who the
but
leveler
they're
is and
maybe
like what it
but they're
is.
maybe also not in the best mental state at this point if they're
Correct.
rhyming.
Yeah, I
You
think
know what
they're
I'm saying?
traumatized. And like
Yeah.
who better to be traumatized maybe than maybe Creighton's son who watched Salandra go, who watched Ada Fort go, who with the permission of the council tracks down the path of the open hand
Oh, stop it.
and everybody around him
Go
dies and he's the
away.
only survivor,
Stop it.
right?
Oh my
Like
god, stop.
imagine that.
Literally,
Imagine how horrible that existence is.
literally stop talking right now. We know that the High Republic is pain, and like I was never more reminded of that than like, wow, look at this nice YA book about this religious cult and these young Jedi, and oh my god, they're all dead, and I really don't need to go through that again. Actually, with the open hand, at the open hand.
Yeah. It could be
But I feel
Salandra
like it's a
too. This could be a Salandra. We don't know the gender of the character too. So like it could be anybody.
honestly, I'd be really upset if it were Solandra because, you know, she's worked so hard to like get out of her pit of despair about her first Padawan, and now she's got her second Padawan, and then her friend Kef dies, and then everybody else around her dies, and now she's talking in the Shri Karai Karai rhymes. Like that's not a good trajectory for her. If it's gonna happen to anybody, make it Crichton, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, I just want Solandra to like die of old age and be fine, you know?
Just be happy, have a
Right,
few mai
right.
tais, you know, just have a good life. But anyways, plugged for everybody to read Midnight Horizon. It's my favorite book of the High Republic Initiative.
Is it really?
Can't wait for DJO. Yeah, definitely. I think so.
I didn't know that.
That and Rising Storm are just so good.
I think
Daniel
mine is
Jose
Rising
Older,
Storm.
please write another book very soon. I'm so excited for whatever you might have.
We love DJO
no,
books.
He's right. I think he's writing something in phase 3. I think he said at New York Comic Con. He mentioned something. I just can't remember. So, anyways, outlook not so good according to the High Republic 8 Ball.
Right.
There are some synopsis as well for Planet X, Quest for Planet X, and Path of Vengeance. So those are out there. We won't read them off here, but if you want to go check those out somewhere, I think they probably should be on the websites now for the books. Things aren't looking so great with our characters. There's gonna be like more graphs involved. Planet X, Marta Rowe, the Leveler, Yana is gonna be back in the mix. Rupert Natani is going to play a role according to these synopsis. So like, there's a lot going
Everybody's
on.
back. Everybody's back.
I hope we don't lose Rupert is the only thing, because if Solandra's show loses another Padawan, maybe that ends up being the hooded figure who's seen everything and lost everything. You know.
I will say with the story, so like just to kind of close out our conversation about Battle of Jedha, like at the end of the day, I do think this story is essential for connecting wave 1 and wave 2 of phase 2. It really does feel like that midpoint. It's not an audio drama that I would recommend to somebody who hasn't tackled phase 2 of the High Republic yet. Like I do think it's probably best with the knowledge of the story so far. But it is one that I do feel like people who are reading the High Republic should definitely pick up. Just to kind of understand the political context of where we're going. So yeah, like that's kind of where I end up with it is like, even though it may not be my favorite, I do think it is essential and is putting down some really interesting political situations, and also is getting us one step closer to like the path becoming the Nile.
Totally. Yeah, even though it hasn't been my favorite of the kind of High Republic initiative, I do think it is still valuable to read. I'm glad I went on the journey, despite, you know, some of the things I would have liked to have seen, but there are still so many great things instilled in this book. And hopefully, like, you know, listening to this conversation, you come away with both the positive and maybe the negative or the criticisms that we might have had. Despite all of that too, I want George Mann to write more Star Wars. Like, he's a great writer. Like, he's Quest for the Hidden City was such a fun book. And I like having his voice as part of this initiative. Dark Legends, Myths and Fables, like Life Day Treasury. Like, he's just written so many good things. So yeah, Battle of Jedha manuscript is out today as of the time of this release.
Oh, great!
Audio.
I didn't realize we
is,
were on that deadline.
Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah, it's already here. So,
well, I
with that
lost
being
like
said,
a week of my life. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's brutal out here sometimes. We're trying to keep track of the days as we get closer and closer to Star Wars celebration here. And phase 2, wave 2.
Phase 2,
Close.
wave 2.
Very close.
Dude, Cataclysm, like being in my inbox right now is like freaking me out.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Battle Scars is up next for us, and then we'll divert back
right
to the
in.
pain of the High Republic for sure.
Why did we do this to ourselves? Why did we start this journey? All I've known is pain and suffering, and now I have a full bookshelf full of like High Republic books. Like, send help to my wallet and to my brain and my heart.
My strange addiction. Sarah owns 10 copies of The Rising Storm for no reason.
Okay, I own.
Sarah's like, I can't stop buying them.
I own 3. Don't come after
too
me.
many.
I could own 4, but I don't. Okay, I own 3.
I think I own 4 actually. That's so embarrassing for me. I shouldn't have bought the Target exclusive one. That was dumb. That was dumb of me, but also not dumb because it's a great cover. It's got Ember on the cover. Yeah, I miss Ember. I miss Belle. Soon enough.
I do like these characters a lot, but I also am very much looking forward to getting back to some of the characters that we know. But I think we need these characters in order to help us better understand, Avar, Elzar,
Totally.
Belle,
yeah,
Ember, etc.
Can't wait.
Buryaga, where you at? Anyway.
Oh. Well, that about wraps it up, I think, for this episode on the Battle of Jedha. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you want to hear more from Sarah and I and the podcast, you can follow us on all of our socials, including Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. We're personally also on those platforms, as well as Letterboxd and Goodreads, so you can see what we're reading, what we're watching. And we also are on pretty much any podcast platform you can name. So subscribe to our feed, so our future High Republic coverage drops into your inbox. We got a lot of episodes coming in the next 2 months around the High Republic, and you'll want to stay tuned to those because they're going to be good ones. Let me tell you, you're not going to want to miss them. Trust us.
I mean, we haven't read the books yet, but once we do, it's over.
Once we do, it's done. Yeah. I have a good feeling about some of the books coming out, though. They're going to be good ones.
Definitely. All right. We also have a Patreon where tiers start at just $1. We're very grateful for all of our patrons who truly help make the show happen. We say this week after week, but it truly is very true. Sometimes running a podcast costs a little bit of money, and you help us keep the lights on in our hobby podcast. So thank you to Ben, Brian, Cheryl, Clay, Deborah, Dylan, Huang, Jennifer, Knights of Ren, Leanne, Levi, Lucy, Lindsay, Rob, Saber Bouquet, Scanna, Sky Talkers, Stephen, Tom, Travis, and our 2 newest patrons, Emma and D-Sizzle. Thank you guys so much for being here and for helping us out, make this podcast happen, and for just listening every single week. We appreciate you endlessly. And to anybody who listens to this episode, hi, thank you. I hope you are hydrated today, and I hope you have a great day.
We got lots coming on the Patreon in the next couple of months too. So if you're a huge fan of the High Republic comics, you'll want to go subscribe and join our Patreon, because that's the only place you can hear us talk about comics. So
it's true.
Very
Brad
fun
bullies
and
me to
chaotic.
read them. No, they're good though.
Well, that's all for today, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, may the Force be with you always.
Bye.